In this video, I'm going to teach you how to say PlayStation in Japanese, as well as a few words associated with it, and a little bit of simple grammar. However, before we begin, don't forget that if there's anything you want me to translate, you can leave it in the comments and I'll make a video of it. Now, you're going to need to learn how to read hiragana and katakana before understanding this video. If you don't, there's another video I made. For the same channel that teaches you how to read those. Anyway, this is how you write the word for PlayStation in Japanese. It's pronounced PlayStation. Oddly enough, though, you don't necessarily have to write it in Japanese to be understood. As you can see by this Amazon.com page, it can also, let me zoom in for a second, it can also be written in English. PlayStation is a really long word in Japanese, and like a lot of loan words in Japanese, there is a way to shorten it. For example, you could shorten it to just Playste. It's a lot shorter, and it's acceptable too. You can also abbreviate it in English characters. For example, you can just say PS instead. But what about when there's a number? A lot of people that have a PlayStation, when they learn a new language, the first thing they want to know is how do they pronounce the number behind the PlayStation? Do they pronounce it in the actual language, or can it be said in English? The answer to that is it can be pronounced in English. For example, the 2 in PlayStation 2 would be pronounced tsu, and the 3 would be pronounced 3. The 4 is pronounced 4. For example, if you have a PlayStation 3, you would call it PlayStation 3. This is how you say PlayStation Network in Japanese. PlayStation Network. But that's a very long word, so you can just abbreviate it as PSN. This is how you say memory card. Memory card. Now we will learn how to say the name of the controller as well as the names of the buttons on it. The Japanese word for DualShock is DualShock. It can also be pronounced DualShock, depending on your preference. You may have thought that everything dealing with the PlayStation in Japanese is as easy as saying it in English with an accent. But unfortunately, this is where the similarity ends. The charger cable for the DualShock 3 and 4 controllers are called Juden cable. And this is how you write it. The first letter, Ju, is written like this. The second letter, Den, which means electricity, is written like this. And cable is a katakana word derived from the word cable. In Japanese, most video game manuals refer to the controller as an analog controller. As you may have guessed, this means analog controller. Unlike most of the words you've been learning so far, there's actually a kanji symbol for the triangle button. It's called sankaku. And this is how it's written. San, which means 3. And let's see. Alright, hold on. Okay, let's see. Sun. Okay. Sankaku means triangle, and here's how you say triangle button. Sankaku botan. There's a kanji symbol for the circle too. It's called maru, and here's how it's written. And here's how it's pronounced. Maru. Here's how you say circle button. Maru botan. You would think that because X is a letter, the X button would be as simple as saying X in English, but unfortunately it's not quite like that. The X actually has a name when it comes to the button anyway, because Japan also considers the X to be a symbol of what? I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, the X is called batsu, and it's a katakana letter. A katakana word. Batsu. And how you say X button is Bats botan. Took me like a year to figure that one out. And it was actually very confusing when I was playing a video game. They were telling me push the Bats botan, and I'm like, what does that mean? As you may have guessed, the square also has a symbol. It's called shikaku, which means square, of course. It's spelled with the symbol shi, which means 4, of course. And the word kaku, which means angle. Oops. Let me erase that. Or let's see. And of course, here's how you pronounce it. Oh wait, I put it over the wrong symbol. Shikaku. And here's how you say square button. Shikaku botan. The 4 directional buttons, also called the D-pad, also have names for them. The directional buttons are called Hokoki, which is spelt like this. Oh wait, wrong stroke order. Am I forgetting something? Hold on. Okay, let's see. Hokoki. And here's how you pronounce it. Hokoki. Now, the key is a loan word, and it basically means key as in a button. Each individual button also has a name. The up button is called we, and it's written like this. The down button is called sta, which of course means down, and it's written like this. Kind of looks like an upside down version of this one. The left button is called hidari, and it's spelled like this. And the right button is called migi, and it's spelled like this. Shita, hidari, migi. The analog buttons the analog sticks are actually literally translated as the left stick and the right stick. The left analog stick is called hidari stick, and the right analog stick is called migi stick. The select button is called select. And the start button is called start or stato sometimes. It's written in katakana. And the PS button is just called PS button. And now for the R buttons. The numbers in these buttons are actually pronounced in Japanese. The L1 button is called L1. The L2 is called L2, and the R3 button is called the L3 button is called R3. And the same for the R1, the R buttons. R1 is called R1, R2 is called R2, and R3 is called R3. Now I will teach you how to say game console in Japanese. It actually literally just means game machine. How you say it is game, which means game, of course, and then the word key, which means machine. It's written like this. Let's see. This is a very complicated symbol to write. Let's see. This is pronounced key, and it means machine. So game key means game console. Now I'll teach you how to say read, as in read a disc. The Japanese word for reading a disc is yomikomu, and this is how it's written. Oh wait, hold on. Okay, let's see. Yomikomu means to read a disc or something similar. And this is how it's pronounced. Yomikomu. Now I will teach you the difference between wa and ga. These are some differences that confuse a lot of people learning this language. Now, this is actually pronounced ha, but it's pronounced wa when it follows the topic of a sentence, and this is pronounced, well, we already know it's pronounced ga. It goes after the subject of a sentence. The difference between the topic and the subject is usually really hard to explain to a language that doesn't have anything like this. I mean, English has nothing similar to this in our grammar, so it's really hard to explain it. However, one website that I read that explained these symbols made it sound pretty simple. Basically, ga would be used if you were asking a question like, which one in a group of something does this or can do that or etc. And then you would use ga to answer the question. And wa would be used anywhere else, like if you're just making an ordinary statement but not necessarily answering a question. For example, this is a question. It reads, "Donna genki ga Blu-ray o yomikomemasu ka?" Which means, which kind of game console is capable of reading a Blu-ray disc? Now, donna means what kind of, genki means game console, ga is the subject marker, that's what it's usually called, Blu-ray means Blu-ray, o is it's called the object marker of a sentence. It goes after the object of a sentence, i.e. the object that a verb does something to. And then yomi komemasu ka, which means is able to read. I probably should explain how this type of sentence is constructed first. This is yomikomu, which means reading something such as a disc or a CD or something. And how you say able to read a disc in this specific verb, you get rid of the letter mu and change it to meru. Adding an eru sound at the end of a verb changes it to a can-do type verb. So yomikomeru changes the meaning from read a disc to be able to read a disc. Now, this question is in its polite form if you were talking to someone you don't know well or someone of higher importance than you, like, for example, your manager or something. And so to change this into a question form, you get rid of the ru and change it to masu. That changes it to yomikomemasu, which is the polite form of the verb to be able to read, for example, a disc. Now, to change it into a question, can it read a disc or something like that? You just put ka behind it and a question mark. Now it says yomikomemasu ka. Can it read a disc? Now, I'm asking which in a group of all game consoles is able to read this specific type of disc, a Blu-ray disc. And since I'm asking a question, I use ga instead of wa. Or at least that's how the website explains it. And how you answer the question. Now, if I wanted to answer this question by saying the PlayStation 3 is able to read Blu-ray discs, I would answer by saying PS3 ga Blu-ray o yomikomemasu. That's in the polite form. If you were talking to someone you don't know well, someone who's considered an elder to you, someone with a special title, for example, a sergeant or something, and probably even for your grandparents. However, if you wanted to ask or answer this question and you were talking to a close family member, such as your brother, sister, mother, father, or a very close friend that you know very well, then you would probably ask this in a much different way. For example, oh yeah, I almost forgot to mention. Notice how I use ga to answer the question, not wa. According to the website I got this information from, that's how you would use it. You would use wa if you were making the statement, the PlayStation 3 can read Blu-ray discs. However, if you were answering a question, you would use ga instead of wa. Now, if I wanted to ask what type of game console is capable of reading a Blu-ray disc, and I'm not using the polite form, I would just shorten it by saying Donna genki ga Blu-ray o yomikomeru. Notice that, and to make the question form, I dropped the masu ka part of the word and just replace it with ru and put a question mark behind it. This is okay in slang, but not necessarily okay in correct grammar. However, if you're talking to a close friend or relative, correct grammar isn't necessarily needed, and you can drop a few things, abbreviate a few things, etc., and it would still be considered acceptable. But you better not use this in this form if you were like in an office or something. Now, if I wanted to say the PlayStation 3 can, using this form of the sentence, I would just say PS3 ga. Notice I didn't even finish the sentence in this case. That's mainly because the rest of the sentence is already obvious because of what the question was asking, and I'm just answering the question, so I don't need to put the rest of it down, at least not in slang anyway. I can just abbreviate it by saying the PlayStation 3 can, rather than going all the way and saying the entire sentence and saying the PlayStation 3 can read Blu-ray discs. That would just be saying too much. Like, you don't need that because it's already obvious. So I just said PS3 ga. That gives you enough information to know that I'm answering the question by saying the PlayStation 3, and I used ga to indicate that I'm answering the question. Well, that's all the time I have. Next week, I will cover how to say the parts of the human eye in Japanese.